Hey there, drone fans. Rick here again from Drone Valley. In today's clip, I'd like to cover the brand new Mavic Air that was just announced yesterday by DJI at an event in New York City. Now, we were lucky enough to be invited to the event, and after having spent time with the quad and studied some of the design choices they made and some of the engineering improvements that are built into this tiny little flying machine, I'm absolutely blown away by it. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it, to be honest with you. I was up half the night studying some of the stuff that's built into it, comparing specifications, and they're breaking new ground with this thing. And I know some of you think, Rick, you're a DJI fanboy. Every time they release something, you're going to give it good marks. But that's not at all true. I'm a fan of the hobby, and I'm certainly a fan of hardcore engineering. So when you put something out in the street like this, that's radically different than anything you've released before, I have to give you good marks. And I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about what's different about this quad, why it's important, and really, if you look closely under the covers, you're going to find a lot of engineering changes in this product that are going to reverberate down the road. So when you start complaining about, hey, it's not a Mavic 2, why isn't it a Phantom 5? A lot of the stuff that's in here is probably going to show up in those two products down the road. So unlike a lot of the clips you're going to see out there that are just going to be dry clips about specifications and how cool it is, to me, it doesn't matter that it's cool, even though this one's incredibly cool. It matters why it's different. Why is there a value there for me as a flyer? What's different about it from all the stuff that's on the market today, all the noise that's out there? Why is this one something I should look at? So in this clip, I'm just going to touch on some of the subjects. I promise you I'm going to come back and do much more in-depth clips on some of the technology that's in there around their new sinusoidal ESCs, some of the power requirements that they've built into it, how they've extended the Wi-Fi range, all the stuff that makes this what I think to be a really groundbreaking technology in the quad space. And honestly, I'm going out on a limb here, but I think if you're looking for a quad, stop looking. This is the quad. This is the quad you want. Now, if you own a quad, you can spend all day long debating of, should I get it if I have a Mavic or should I upgrade from the Spark? I think that would be a good upgrade for you. But if you don't own a quad today, don't wait. Get online, order this thing right now, because I don't think there's going to be anything at all that's going to come close to exactly what this quad can do in the next 12 months. And even if they come out with a Mavic Pro 2 or a Phantom 5, those are going to be way more expensive quads. Now maybe you can justify that if you're a professional photographer, you've got needs to fly out 35 miles with a quad. But for me, this thing packs everything anybody who's ever been interested in the hobby needs into a tiny little package that you can take with you, that's easy to use. It's got a ton of autonomous things built into it, and it looks like it's going to be a ball of fun to fly. Now, I haven't gotten one yet. I wasn't lucky enough to get one of the advanced units like some of the other channels. I'm not complaining, although I am a little bit. I did order a couple of them, so the minute they get here, you know I'm going to take them out in the field and do comparisons. But from everything I've seen, this quad is really unlike anything else that's been released up to this point. And I'll spend some time talking about that. So I'm going to break this clip into a couple of different sections, and I'll put markers below where you can actually fast forward if you get bored with a particular section. In this initial section, I'll talk about the physicality of it. So I'll give you the boring specs of how far it can fly, how long it can fly, and all the other cool stuff. Then I'll spend a little bit of time on the imaging portion of it, because that's important. There's some changes there. The software portion is different. There's some technology in there that I'll spend a little bit of time talking about the physicality of it. And then the last section, I'll really spend a few minutes just talking about why this quad's important and how it differs from other quads in the market. Because again, for me, I get a lot of quads sent to me for review, and most of them, quite honestly, are clones of other quads. So people have just basically changed the design a little bit. They've taken technology off the shelf. They put it in some type of shiny little package, and they release it as a quad. I'm going to yawn when I see those. I mean, they're great. They fly. They're not that much different. This quad is different for so many different reasons. So as you watch this clip, hopefully you'll understand some of the stuff that they've done with this. And I know there's an army of engineers working at DJI in both their engineering department, and there's an army of design engineers working out there as well that are proud as can be about this quad. Most of what they've built into it kind of gets lost on the public. So I'm hoping I can draw some of those differences out and really point them out to you. Because again, at the end of the day, I'm spending my money on something. I got to know that I'm buying something that's going to really do the job for me. And I'm telling you, again, without reservation, this Mavic Air product has got everything you need. Let's take a closer look at the specifications and some of the physical characteristics of the Mavic Air so you have a real good idea of how this quad's going to perform in the wild. Let's start with the flight time. It'll fly for 21 minutes on a full charge. Now, I think that's okay, but a lot of people are questioning why it wasn't longer. And honestly, you're fighting the laws of physics. It's a smaller quad. It's about half the size of a Mavic Pro. Smaller quad, smaller battery, less power, less flight time. You really can't defy that law. It's just one of those things that today, the way LiPos are built, that's the best you're going to get. I actually think they've extended the flight time considerably because they've upgraded the quad in a lot of different ways. They've got a much more aerodynamic design. It's smaller physically, it's lighter. They've also upgraded the ESCs. So they're using the latest state-of-the-art ESCs to spin those blades. They're called FOC sinusoidals, and they're used on the Mavic Pro Platinum as well. So by using those much more efficient ESCs, you're not only getting longer flight times out of it, you're getting a somewhat quieter quad and a much more controllable quad. So good on them for doing that. But having said that, the battery fits right between the Spark and the Mavic, which is an incredibly powerful battery in such a small package. You can fly up to 2.5 miles with this thing. Now, I wondered about that, and I think that's amazing because it's based on Wi-Fi. So the Mavic Air doesn't use OcuSync technology or Lightbridge technology. It uses Wi-Fi, a modified version of Wi-Fi, but then so does the Spark. So how come the Spark only flies 1.2 miles, but the Mavic Air can fly 2.5 miles? If you look close at the specifications, they've actually doubled the transmitter power in both the controller and the quad, which gives you that extended distance. Now I'm going to do a separate clip talking about that as well. But that's kind of cool, right? It also is a completely foldable design. Now I know I said that quickly, but if you think about that, it's not just the Mavic that's smaller, it's a ground up build for this technology. It's almost like you're building a rocket to go to the moon, and you've been successful over the last 10 years to build this rocket, and it took off and it got to the moon, and you scrapped everything and started from scratch and said, yeah, kind of a cool rocket. We're going to build a brand new rocket from the ground up. That's what you're getting with this Mavic Air. It's not like they took the Mavic and kept parts of it and changed things about it. It's a totally radical design, and the way the arms fold in are different as well. It's a much more compact setup and much easier to transport around. You've also got an increased number of sensors. So you've got front sensors, back sensors, and down sensors, which are optical, and they're stereoscopic. And what that means is the Mavic's going to look at a particular location, both front, back, and down, and it's going to be able to draw a 3D image of what's approaching it. You couple that with the advanced crash detection or object detection software that's built inside of it, and it can not only see a lot of different objects, it's actively planning a path between those to avoid bumping into something when you're flying. So the autonomy built into it to be able to fly safely is another major upgrade that they've had over previous versions of the quad. So that's pretty cool. In addition to that, you've got a brand new remote control. I mentioned that before, but every little detail of this quad is something they've thought about. So just picking on the remote for a second, if you saw the remotes from the other quads, this is one from the Spark. The biggest challenge with these, and I've got one of those protectors on there, is that these fingers stick up. These actual sticks stick up. And if you throw this in a bag, these are going to get bent, or they could get bent because they're based on aluminum. On the new controller, these actually unscrew, and not only unscrew and you're going to lose them in your case, they unscrew and fit inside the arms of the controller. So the engineers are sitting down going, all right, that's a bit of a problem for portability. How do we fix that? Well, gee, we can remove these. But then the guy's going to lose them, so what do we do then? Well, let's find a place we can tuck them into the remote. So they pop them in the bottom remote, you close it up, it's nice and flat, so it's very easy to transport. It doesn't have a lot of the extra features like the Mavic remote has. Like here's the Mavic remote. The Mavic remote's got a display up top that gives you a lot of telemetry information, battery information, signal strength, that type of thing. The Spark remote was a lot simpler, and this new Mavic Air remote is very similar to a Spark remote with a lot less clutter and controls on the top of it. So I think, sitting down, looking at exactly what pilots like me care about when I'm putting a remote together is something their engineers spend a lot of time on. So good on them for that. The camera on the new Mavic, and again, I don't have it, but the Mavic Air, this one seemed a bit exposed to me. So one of the complaints I had of the Mavic Pro when it first came out was that the camera was in the front of the Mavic and it was on the bottom. So if I'm going to have a crash, what's going to hit first? The camera. So with the Mavic Air, they've really thought about it, and they design a housing around that camera so that it's going to protect it from most crashes, but more importantly, it extends a little bit on either side, which gives you sort of sun shielding when you're flying, so the sun's not going to wash across those lenses. So good on them for doing that. 3-axis gimbal. It's got a 4K 30 frames per second video capability in it, and I know a lot of people are belly aching about that. They're saying, geez, why isn't it 4K 60 frames per second? Honestly, I film in 4K, I film in 1080p. 1080p is most of what I record in on most days, and you're really not buying a professional drone when you're buying a Mavic Air. You're buying kind of a combination of a entry-level drone and a prosumer drone. So I think for me that 4K 30 frames per second is plenty. It also does that at 100 megabits a second, which is an incredibly fast ingest rate, if you will, for that kind of video. And you can't do that easily. You've got to have what's called a digital signal processor, which is the part that actually makes sense of that stream of video coming in and processing it. If that chip isn't upgraded, you can't take that in at 100 megabits a second. So they've not only improved improved the DSP inside the unit, but they've increased the amount of megabits per second that they can actually ingest. They're offering it in 3 colors, so you can get it in sort of the obsidian color, which is like a matte black. You can get it in white, which I believe is matte as well. I can't remember from the show. And then you can get it in red, which I think is called Fire Red, which is a shiny looking red. Really nice design. One other thing they've changed, there's a bunch of stuff they've changed, but one thing important that they changed was on the front legs, the actual Wi-Fi antennas are popped up, so it's nice and compact. You flip those down to actually fly the unit, and those Wi-Fi antennas are going to be on the bottom of the quad, which is where you need them to be to make that direct line of sight for connectivity to your controller. So every little aspect of this they've thought about. I love so much that they really sat down and didn't just say, let's take the Mavic, steal what we can from it, and try and shrink it down. They started from scratch, and Michael Perry, who was on stage doing the presentation, I think he did a great job describing this quad, because man, if I were up on that stage, you wouldn't be able to shut me up. I'd just be talking about every aspect of it. But one thing he brought up, which I think is really telling, is that I always talk about how hard an engineering project it is to build something like this from scratch. And he'd mentioned the minute they released the Mavic a year and a half ago, their engineering teams went right back to the labs, threw out everything they'd started with the Mavic, and started from scratch designing this new Mavic Air. And I believe them totally. I feel like they've looked at the market and they've thought about what they want to build for that market. And the Mavic is a great product. I fly that Mavic more than anything else I fly. It's a Mavic Pro. It's a wonderful gear. Take it out in the field and I fly it a ton. I fly the Spark a lot. These are dramatically different animals. Something in the middle like the Mavic Air, that's a home run for most people looking for quads today, because it gives you the autonomy of what the Spark can do with all the advanced features and functions of just hitting a button, having that quad do these amazing aerial photography moves for you automatically. But it also gives you the thrill of flying a quad because you've got a controller and you can fly 2.5 miles and get 21 minutes of flight time out of it. So pretty cool. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the flight autonomy that's built into this. So I mentioned before that it's got stereoscopic sensors in the front and the back and down. That's great. Sensors are great. Improving the sensors, having more sensors in your quad is a wonderful thing, but gathering all that data and making sense of it is a big problem. So you have to have a very powerful processor inside your quad to be able to assimilate all that data and make decisions on your behalf. But more importantly, you have to have artificial intelligence inside that quad that knows it's approaching a tree and can see something that is an empty space and find that empty space and actually navigate through it. So this new Flight Autonomy 2.0 system that got built in is a combination of the intelligence to handle all the stuff coming in from those different sensors and processing it, in addition to which it's making decisions actively about how this thing is flying and how to avoid obstacles out there in front of you or behind you or below you. So very, very cool technology. So stay tuned that I'll get into the imaging and some of the software conversations and some of the flight characteristics. In this section, I'd like to cover the imaging technology and the software behind the brand new Mavic Air. When DJI released the Spark a while back, they were really sailing into uncharted territory. They were betting big on a product they'd never built for a market they weren't sure existed. And the intention of the Spark was to design a simple to use flying camera that the average consumer could quickly throw up in the air and have it be smart enough to capture that perfect shot, whether it be their family, the beach, or maybe a landscape that they happen to be hiking near. And the Spark does all that stuff. But it was a radical departure from all the stuff they'd designed before. Because remember, before the Spark was released, the products that DJI built were really prosumer products. The Inspire, the Phantom, the Mavic were all what I'll call hardcore quads that were built for nerds like me that like to get a controller out, spend a few minutes syncing everything up, putting it up in the air, and then manually flying to a location to capture that perfect shot. And if I'm being honest, the Spark is a way better pilot than most of us, because the autonomy built into this product allows you with the tap of a button to do all kinds of complex maneuvers in the air and capture that perfect rock solid video. Now I can do it with the Mavic, but I've been flying an awful long time and I'm still not that great at it. So if I'm trying to spin around a 360 around a fixed point, I've got to not only spin the quad, but keep the camera focused on that particular area. And I'm watching a lot of videos out there where there's a lot of shaky video trying to keep that point of interest in front of you. The software inside the Spark does that automatically, and it's got all kinds of other great shots. It's got the drone-y shot that flies back. It's got the 360. It's got all kinds of amazing functionality built into it. So it was really the first quad that had that level of autonomy built in. Now the Mavics inherited some of those features as well as the Phantom and the Inspire, but the software started there. The new Mavic Air shares a lot of those functionalities, so it's really built to be kind of a better version than the Spark, with a lot more advanced features, but it does share a lot of the heritage of the Mavic because it comes with a controller. You can still fly 2.5 miles. You get fantastic video out of it. So in a lot of ways, it's a bit of a hybrid between these two. And I made the joke on Twitter that it was like the Mavic and the Spark got together and had a baby, and that's what the Mavic Air is, because it really is a pedigree of both of these quads. But let's get down to the specs, and I'll talk about the software, which is really what it shares with the Spark product. So the product itself has got a brand new 3-axis gimbal that's totally stabilized, and they've actually put 3 differing points inside there with shock absorption for that the gimbal assembly, so that during the vibration, maybe in a heavy wind or when you're flying quickly, I think it's a 0.005 degrees of tilt, which means it's rock solid up in the air. In addition to that, it's a micro 2/3 sensor. It'll do 4K video at 30 frames per second, but it does it at 100 megabits a second, which is incredibly good throughput for that video, which means you're getting a lot of information back into the quad. They've also enhanced what's called the digital signal processor, which is the chip that's responsible of turning that analog video into digital imaging, which is a way more robust system inside there. Now, a lot of people are complaining. They're like, how come it doesn't do 60 frames a second? Again, I talked about that earlier in the other section. It's not that big a deal for me. 30 frames a second at 4K is perfect. You can drop down to 1080p. You can do 60 frames a second. You can do 120 frames a second for ultimate and slow-mo as well. So a lot of people like shooting in slow motion. This is the one to use for that. In addition to that, you've got, like I said, the improved DSP. You've got HDR, so if you're shooting photos with thing, it's a 12 megapixel camera that'll shoot great photos. But having that HDR functionality means that the quad is smart enough to look at what you're taking a picture of and make adjustments on the fly to give you the best resolution out of that picture, the best ISO, the best brightness, and pull out the highlights of what you're taking a shot of. And if you do comparisons between a non-HDR photo and an HDR photo, it's really, really impressive. I mentioned the triangular stabilizers on there. It also has a tremendous amount of smarts built in. So the Spark was really the first one that did things like active track. Well, we did active track on here, but it was a little bit clumsy, and it's gotten way better since then. But the active track on here was rock solid. So they built in profiles where it could tell the difference between a person, a dog, somebody on a bicycle, and really stay on that person. Because active track is a complicated thing to do, because you as a person, if I draw a box around me, for example, and I'm standing there, it can track me. And if I move slowly to either side, it can track me. But the minute I start turning, my image changes dramatically. And the quad has to be smart enough to realize, okay, it's a little bit different than what he looked like a second ago, but it's still probably the same guy. So it works okay for there. Now, they've also upgraded over the years through firmware the ability for it to track those objects. And they've added, like I said, those profiles for me and a bike, me running, a dog, whatever I want to be tracking, a boat, some type of watercraft. But the challenge has always been, when I'm in an environment with a lot of moving objects, the active track still would look at me, and if I got smaller and somebody else got bigger, it might actually shift to them and start chasing them around the park, which is not a good thing. The new Mavic Air has the ability, it's Active Track 2.0, I think it is, but it has the ability to actually sense up to 16 moving objects in a particular area, and then you point at the one you want and it stays lock solid on them. So it's not, even though there's 15 other things moving, it's going to stay on you and follow you through that environment. A totally cool thing. You can't do that easily because the sensors are improved, but the brains behind it, the intelligence, the algorithms that actually keep track of that person, are all done behind the scenes. So that's pretty incredible. It also has VIO, which is used for visual positioning. And I'd mentioned this odometry concept before, and I'll talk about it in another clip. But essentially what it's doing is building a map through the visuals that it sees to keep that rock solid positioning. So if it starts moving, or if you're inside and you haven't got GPS coordination because you're inside a building or something, that VIO will actually keep it on target. And that's a radically new technology as well, and that's built into the Mavic Air. It also has quick shot modes. So the Spark was the first one to introduce quick shot modes, and quick shot modes have things like rocket, droney, circle, and helix. Those are built into the Spark. You get those same 4 modes here, but there are 2 advanced modes that you get in the Mavic Air. One is called Boomerang, and if you've been on their website, it's a really cool imaging mode. It basically flies away from you low and then behind you high and then down again. It's a 360, but it's an angular 360. It's a very, very cool look. And then the last one they've got is this ability to do sort of a 32 megapixel round out picture that you can basically do like a VR or 360-degree picture for 32 megapixels combined, where it'll go up and take those shots, very quickly stitch them together. And if you're wearing the goggles, you can actually look around the environment as if you were in a virtual reality environment of the pictures you just took of the area you're in. So really, really cool stuff there. They also have one other mode called Asteroid, which I don't know how they do it, but it basically flies up in the air, gets that 360 view, then flies back down into the image to show you from above what it looks like as you're swooping down in. It's an incredibly cool mode. And again, all of that's built into it because of the software behind it. So what I'm thinking happening here is that technology is going to permeate some of the other models that are coming out. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if some of those modes through firmware updates show up in the Mavic and show up in the Phantom and probably show up in the Inspire. But I have a feeling that the software they're developing with the artificial intelligence and the algorithms behind it that make these decisions on your behalf are only going to get smarter. So when the Mavic 2 comes out or the Phantom 5 comes out, I bet those things are going to be built in there as well. So that's pretty much it for the imaging and the software. What I like so much about this company, and I've said this before in other clips, is that a lot of companies that build a quad build it for maybe a 12 or 18 month cycle. And then once they're done with that, they build a new one with a whole bunch of new features, and you got to buy the new one to get the features. What I love about DJI, and you can grumble all you want about the firmware updates that come out, they take the features they design for a particular quad and try to spread them throughout the product line. So a product like the Mavic that came out with an extremely functional firmware in it has gotten way smarter, way easier to fly, and way more sophisticated over the years because of those firmware updates that have been released. So in the last 18 months that this product has been on the market, it's dramatically different than when it was released to today, and I believe the Mavic Air will be the same. But when you're buying that quad, you're essentially sitting right between these two products where you're getting the autonomy, the flight autonomy, the intelligence of the Spark with the real feel of a quad, flying that Mavic Air through a joystick. So pretty cool product. From my perspective, hands down the smartest quad I've ever flown. I wanted to take a few minutes and try and explain why I think this Mavic Air is an incredibly cool quad and maybe help you make the decision if it's right for you or not. I know when the announcement came, on our channel at least, the comments were split in one of two directions. A lot of you said, hey, we're super disappointed. We were expecting a Mavic Pro 2 or a Phantom 5 to come out. I kind of understand that. There's a lot of hype around these announcements, and I could see where a lot of people were speculating it's going to be a Mavic Pro 2, and it didn't happen, so people are upset. But the other side of the coin is, and this was the vast majority of comments I got, how cool this thing is. Oh my gosh, it's got everything built in. How do I order it? Where can I get one? So I think there's a lot of interest out there for all the reasons I've mentioned before. I've spent a lot of time talking about the technology, the imaging capabilities, the software. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, what are you going to do with the quad? If you're a hardcore quad flyer, Mavic's your answer. It's an expensive quad. It's sophisticated. It'll fly, 4.5 miles. It's got fantastic video capabilities, picture capabilities, and it really is designed to fly a long time. So go with the Mavic Pro Platinum if you're going to buy that one. If you're a Spark owner, I think this is a great upgrade for you. So if you've outgrown the Spark and you want a better camera, you want a little more flight time out of it, you've matured beyond what a Spark can do for you, and you're okay with carrying a little larger quad, this Mavic Air is a perfect home run for you. If you don't own a quad today, and I said this in the beginning of the clip, don't wait. Jump on this Mavic Air. Because in my opinion, there isn't another manufacturer out there, and I just got back from CES looking at all the latest gear, there isn't a single manufacturer out there that can beat this quad as far as functionality, price, and performance anywhere in the market today. And I think that's about a 12-month window. The only people that could beat this are DJI. And if they're going to release a product, it's not going to be close to this. It's going to be this and better. So I'm thinking if they come out with a new product in the spring, and I fully believe they've got a Mavic Pro 2 in the works, they've got a Phantom 5 in the works, they probably have an Inspire 3 on the drawing board if it isn't already out there testing in flight. I think the Mavic Pro 2 will hit. It'll probably hit in the spring, maybe the summer, same with the Phantom 5, but they'll be a lot more expensive. I mean, this product today is sold in two different versions, the basic version for $799 and the Mavic Air Fly More combination, which is $999 right now. By the way, if you're thinking about the difference between those two, I'm going to do a whole clip on that. But the extra $200 gets you a lot more stuff. You get 2 extra batteries, you get more blades, you get a charging hub, you get a carrying case. You add all that up, that's about $400 worth of gear. So if you're thinking of buying the Mavic Air, go with the Fly More combination. But back to the original point, if the Mavic Pro 2 hits, it's going to be a lot more expensive. That'll be a $1,200, $1,300 drone minimum, maybe $1,400. Is it worth the extra $500? I don't know if it is. I think the Mavic Air today flies far enough, flies long enough, has all the whiz-bang cool features built into it around autonomous flight, obstacle avoidance, all the stuff you're going to care about when you're flying your quad. And let's be honest, 2.3 miles or 2.5 miles, that's plenty. That's well beyond visual line of sight. So if you want to fly further than that, you're breaking the law. Unless you've got X-ray vision where you can keep track of it. I can't see out that far, and I don't think most people can. So in the States anyway, if you're going to try and fly further than that, you're wasting energy to get out that far. You can't really see the quad. So for me, the Mavic Air at this point is hands down the best quad in the market. I'm totally excited about it. I'm disappointed I didn't get one as part of the embargo, but I did order two of them. The minute they get in, I'm going to tear them apart and do comparisons between the two. But my honest opinion on this thing is I've seen nothing like it. And I've talked to all the major manufacturers. There's nothing coming. This is the baby to own for the next 12 months if you're going to buy a quad. So if you're on the fence, like I said last time, get off the fence and buy this quad. You're going to be really, really happy with it. Springtime's coming. You're going to want to get out there and fly. This is the perfect quad to own. So anyway, that's it for today. If you guys have any questions about what I talked about, I went through a ton of material here today. Drop them in the comments below and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. Like I said, I did order a couple of these guys. The minute they get in, I'll be doing a ton of clips on it. I'm also going to do individual clips on a lot of the core technology behind this that I'd mentioned a couple of times during this clip. So stay tuned to the channel if you want to get updates on this. I really appreciate you guys watching. I'm sorry it took me so long to get this up. We just went to the show yesterday, but I really wanted to pour over the details of it to understand from an engineer's perspective why these changes were made and what they mean for us. And hopefully I've explained that pretty well in the clip. So thanks an awful lot for watching. Until next time, happy flying.